of corporations that cause harm to the citizens of Arcata and the environment that we depend on for life.
The problem is the huge corporations that are not here. One of the things that was talked about here is harm. And the question I have for those people is, who determines what harm is? You can have a corporation that obeys every law of the land and can still be producing harm.
My question is, can it be done differently? What are we afraid of? I mean, are all the businesses going to leave Arcata? I don't think so. And if they did, we'd deal with it, or we'd figure it out, or we'd do something different. We're creative people. I just don't see why we're afraid.
The path we're on that Measure F would lead to is the road to serfdom. If you think it's tough making a decision where to buy your stuff today, how tough do you think it is when there's only one provider, and it's the state? And by the way, you don't get to have this little democracy forum in those communities either.
This issue that we are in some way proposing central government control or socialism really is absurd. What we're proposing is democratic authority over corporations.
I think the better way is a boycott. If we don't like, a certain product, if we don't like Pepsi-Cola or Bank of America, or if you don't like what they do, don't use them. That's the way I see the, people's power is.
You have a lot more money than me. You have more votes than I do. If we use the model of boycott and voting with your dollars, that's an undemocratic situation.
People that say they fear their government, I really hope that they understand that they're allowed to participate in their government. They're not allowed to participate in anything that corporations do. So don't fear the government. Help it be the government that you won't fear.
This is beyond my wildest dreams. To see people talking to each other as if there's something we could do, as if we could figure something out,
No more chain restaurants in Arcata after a long-awaited decision by the city.
We know what we need. It's actually a fairly simple set of steps. What we don't have is the political will.
We can change the government. That's the only way we're going to redesign, rethink, reconstitute what capital and property can do.
So what we need to do is to look at the very roots of the legal form that created this beast, and we need to think who can hold them accountable.
They're not graven in stone. They can be dismantled. In fact, most states have laws which require that they be dismantled.
For too long now, giant corporations have been allowed to undermine democracy here in the United States and all over the world. But today, the National Lawyers Guild and 29 other groups and individuals are fighting back. We are calling upon State Attorney General Dan Lundgren to comply with California law and to revoke the corporate charter of the Union Oil Company of California for its repeated and grievous offenses.
We have amidst us giant corporations who are repeat offenders year after year, decade after decade. This is a statute that is well known. It has been used. It can be used. What this will mean is the dissolution of the Union Oil Company of California, the sale of its assets under careful court orders to others who will carry on in the public interest.
This is nothing more than just a smear campaign. This company has been part of California's economy for over 100 years, thousands of jobs. Doesn't mean it's never made any mistakes, paid for those mistakes, but this demonizing of a company, I think I'm in a time warp or something, that I fell asleep and I woke up 50 years ago when we heard that kind of rhetoric.
Well, we have a very, very broad set of people angry, very angry at this corporation.
People from the left of the spectrum who don't produce anything except hot air.
From its complicity in unspeakable human rights violations overseas against women, gays, laborers, and indigenous peoples, to its efforts to subvert U.S. foreign policy and deceive the courts, the public, and its own stockholders, Unocal is emblematic of corporate abuse and corporate power run amok.
Extending a business deal with Burma Army is immoral. It prolongs the Iron Rule in Burma. The pipeline Unicor is building in Burma is vital for survival, cash-strapped army. Unicor cannot do business in Burma without supporting that hopeless regime. It cannot justify.
Commerce and government are not primary, they're secondary institutions. They are derivative of the primary institution, which is the culture where people live their lives. Understanding this is the key to this debate about globalization. If we can begin to reestablish culture as the center where people's power is, then there's a role for corporations and there's a role for government. But those roles are to be attended to, not dominant over the place where people have their story told and where they live out their community values.
The curse for me has been the fact that in making these documentary films, I've seen that they actually can impact change, so I'm just compelled to keep making them.
Yep, that's me, doing what I do. All year long, I give big companies a hard time. But at Christmas time, I like to set aside my differences and reach out to big business, like cigarette companies.
Deck the halls with boughs of holly. 'Tis the season to be jolly.
The awful truth, there was a guy whose healthcare insurance provider said that they would not pay for his pancreas transplant, even though it was clear that they had to do that. They weren't going to do it. They were going to let him die. We showed up with our cameras and conducted a funeral rehearsal for this guy on the lawn of their corporate headquarters.
I didn't know Chris for very long. He was a great guy, he had a lot of integrity, a rich sense of humor. And in fact, I remember something that he often used to say. What was he used to say?
Just want a pancreas.
He used to say, I just want a pancreas.
Within 3 days, this company turns around and says, okay, we'll pay for his transplant.
We have the good fortune of having Chris with us here tonight.
So somebody actually lived as a result of this kind of work.
And his daughter, Brittany.
I went to Littleton, Colorado, where the Columbine shooting took place. And I didn't know this, but when I arrived, I learned what the primary job is of the parents of the kids who go to Columbine High School. The #1 job in Littleton, Colorado, they work for Lockheed Martin, building weapons of mass destruction. But they don't see the connect between what they do for a living and what their kids do at school, or did at school. And so I'm kind of, up on my, high horse, thinking about this. And I thought, I said to my wife, we both are, sons and daughters of auto workers in Flint, Michigan. There isn't a single one of us back in Flint, any of us, including us, who ever stopped to think, this thing we do for a living, the building of automobiles, is probably the single biggest reason why the polar ice caps are going to melt and end civilization as we know it. There's no connect between, I'm just an assembler on an assembly line building a car, which is good for people in society. It moves them around. But never stop to think about the larger picture and the larger responsibility of what we're doing. Ultimately, we have to, as individuals, accept responsibility for our collective action and the larger harm that it causes in our world.
There are many tools for bringing back community, but the importance is not the tools. I mean, there's litigation, there's legislation, there's direct action, there's education, boycotts, social investment. There's many, many ways to address issues of corporate power. But in the final analysis, what's really important is the vision. You have to have a better story.
And until we redefine
our relationship to nature, the power that we have given to these transnational corporations, the international institutions that serve them, and the non-democratic governments that we have, we will not be able to stop this destruction.
One thing